a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello, everyone. So now the end is near, and so we face the final game week. Oh, as I say every year, that's a terrible cliche, an awful way to start the penultimate pod of the season. But it's true. Here we are, ready to go into the final Sunday goal rush, hoping for salvation and excitement, but based on previous experience, for me at least, anticipating heartbreak. Just a warning, I've had a few beers already. I've been out of work, so apologies if I'm less loose than normal. But hey, I mean, you've all seen this before or heard this before, and probably if you have not seen it, you've probably guessed that I've had a few beers during the pod. It's now I come into it having had a few, which kind of loosens the jaw even more than it does before. Here's to look forward to either this week coming or this season ending. I'm not too sure which one's the truth. It is Sam. You're right, mate.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Tom. And obviously, it's not just FPL that I've got to be excited about at the moment. I've got the mighty Saints in a playoff semi-final to look forward to on Friday. So yeah, I mean, we're going to be meeting up obviously on Sunday to either celebrate, commiserate, a bit of both. So my mood will probably be a little bit affected by how Saints get on Friday as well. However, in the meantime, we have a pod to get on with. We are Who Got the Assist. On today's show, as Tom mentioned, it is, of course, the final game week in front of us. So we'll be looking very much ahead squarely at that. We always say it, but this might be a bit of a shorter pod. We were joking about it beforehand. It's probably going to end up being an hour and a half, knowing us. But there is a few things to talk about, of course. We've got to go through the mini league update as it stands. Where is the trophy heading? I don't have any idea. I doubt it's heading to either of us. So one of you out there, you lucky listeners, is going to be receiving a very lovely trophy at the end of the season. We'll, of course, be mainly focused on the Game Week 38 preview, concentrating on some sort of break glass and emergency last-minute punts to solve the inevitable lineup shocks and leaked lineups that we get ahead of 38. So basically, what punts might we take if push came to shove? Or, of course, if you're out there and you're chasing, I think both of us are probably going to be in that mindset as well. Bold claims, of course, and best captain to come. It is the 15th of May. We have Brighton, Chelsea, and Man United, Newcastle United going on in the background. Lots of players involved for both of us. So if there are any screams or boos or hisses throughout the pod, we do apologize, but hopefully that just adds to the drama. Also, a quick shout out, of course, I've briefly hinted at it a minute ago, but FPL Meets is coming this Sunday at the Thirsty Bear in Waterloo, London. If you're in the area, even if you've never been to a meetup before, it is such good fun. Everyone is very warm, welcoming, and if you've never done one before, don't worry. After 5 minutes, that won't matter at all. We're all best mates as soon as we hang out. So yeah, it's great fun. Get on down there if you can and let us know if you're going to be in attendance, because obviously, if you don't know anyone there, Tom and myself will both be very much welcoming all of you with open arms, and hopefully someone to grab a pint with before the games start as well. In the meantime, though, shall we move on to scores on the doors, Tom?
Yeah, that's. I just want to second that FPL Meets thing actually quickly, just because I mean it's always a leveler, especially if you're not sure, you haven't come to a meetup before. I know it's in London, so that's going to obviously exclude loads of people. But if you are in the area, not entirely sure about coming, like just let me kind of just reassure you that as soon as you start to kind of have that common ground that you're both into FPL with whoever you're speaking to, or those people are into FPL, everything else becomes easy. You know, you can talk about FPL for a bit. How's your season gone? You know, what do you need from today? And then that just breaks the ice, and everything else becomes so straightforward, doesn't it? I mean, we met FPL Meets, and it was just one of those things that kind of, you know, you never know who you can meet, basically. It's just really cool to go on, especially when you get older. It's hard to find other people with common interests, and this is one of them. You know, you're so far into it now, you're far down the rabbit hole of FPL if you listen to this, so I thoroughly recommend it, and we'll both be there. I'll probably be there about kind of 2ish, something like that. Come and find me, come and find Sam if you're not sure, and we'll of course get you chatting. I'm not sure we can guarantee we'll get you a beer. We'll see what the situation is like at the time. If we said we'll give anyone a beer who comes and finds us, I'm pretty sure there'll be those people who know us who use that as a loophole. But yeah, if you are genuinely new, I'm sure I'll do what I can to get you a beverage of some sort. Disclaimer, could be water. But hey, right, okay, let's do scores on the doors. God.
Right.
Oh, hello. You've got a very large green arrow, Sam. So anything you say is going to be invalidated. But I'm going to step back, have a 5-minute quietness while you discuss why you are upset with life, despite me taking -16 having a massive green.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm upset with life anymore, but I'd like to cast my mind back to Friday, because anyone listening to this pod week in, week out knows that I've had a bit of a tough time of it since wildcarding in game week 30. Just to list off a few, I made a quick list before the pod. So since wildcarding in game week 30, Lascelles crocked for the season immediately, a doggy crocked for the season, Van Heck, Fabian Schär, who is now apparently back on the bench today. Gusto got injured for a little bit. João Pedro as well very recently got injured and is now back again. Foden leaked to start, so I bought him, and then he didn't play. And of course, all culminated in game week 37, where I actually was feeling pretty good about things. I think I messaged you at about lunchtime on Friday, like, I know what moves I'm making. It's going to be a -4, which seems relatively tame considering what everyone else is doing. -4 sort of felt like par for the course. And I kind of sorted out my team. So I was like, I like the bench. I like the 2 differentials I'm bringing in. More on that in a second. And basically, I finally felt like I kind of got all of my ducks in a row ahead of a big game week and, of course, the bench boost. So I made the moves after Postecoglou's lunchtime-ish press conference, when he said Richarlison is basically absolutely fine, no further injury issues whatsoever. So I messaged you, locked in my team quietly to myself, bought in Trippier for Schär and bought in Richarlison for Garnacho. That was the hit. They were a bit risky, but I really fancied the upside, as I discussed on the pod earlier in the week. About 10 minutes after I'd locked in my transfers and sent it to you, it started falling apart quite quickly. First was João Pedro, who apparently was out, and it was sad news in quotes for De Zerbi. That usually makes you think he's probably out for quite a while. That wasn't the case. He was actually only out for 1 match, but that felt pretty bad. So straight away, that was, okay, who can I bring in for João Pedro? Do I leave it and risk it? Is it anyone worth a hit? Obviously, Nicholas Jackson would be the obvious move in, but I was already tripled up on Chelsea. And then about half an hour after that, Richarlison's national team manager came out and broke separate news saying, oh, by the way, he's literally just gotten injured and we're not going to pick him for the Copa America in another 6 weeks' time. So that was pretty terminal as well. So all of a sudden, I was already on a -4, taking a hit for a player that was definitely going to be out of both matches in the double game week. So I kind of went on tilt a little bit. I don't think I've ever taken a -12, let alone a -16 before. -8, I think, is the most I've ever done. Sorry, -8 is the most I've ever done until this point. And yeah, so had to remove a player I'd already bought for a hit for another hit. Brought in Havertz because at that point I was like, you know what? I don't even care. I just want to set myself up for 38 as well. Havertz seemed like a good enough punt, and I didn't really fancy any of the other double game weekers, so I just went with it. And then because João Pedro was a risk and Gusto was also seemingly going to be minutes managed at the very least, I took basically another -8 to get rid of both of them for Branthwaite and Jackson. So I'm not actually sure if the -16 has paid off. I haven't calculated it because I don't want to be quite frank. And Garnacho could score in the second half. You never know. But all that being said and done, I have found myself on a green arrow on a -16, which feels like a bit of an achievement. 136 points so far. Obviously, with the -16 taken into account, it's 120. Differentials haven't paid off, but it's enough for about a 10k green arrow at the moment, and it gives me a fighting chance at least of top 100k. So yeah, Gvardiol massively paid off, and a few other bits and bobs here and there did all right. And the bench boost, I think, was Branthwaite, Gabriel, and Havertz all returned, and Onana getting, I think, 4 points so far too. So yeah, I shouldn't probably complain that much. It was just a bit frustrating at the time, and it seemed like everything was kind of stacking up against me a little bit. So yeah, there you go. -16. I think I'll hit a green arrow, but you just don't know at this point.
Lovely. I'm very, very happy for you.
Well, it's assured that I'm coming back on the pod next year. So
yeah, exactly. Unless I get rid of you, Sam has left.
Well, yes,
There's mutual discussions have led to no, I'm kidding. Yes, it's been an absolute fucking train wreck for me. I apologise dropping the F bomb, but it's not been good at all. So I think a lot of damage was done last week when I decided to triple up on City attack. That has robbed me of many, many Guardiol points. Yes, no Guardiol has been one bad thing. And then elsewhere, a lot of differentials, like the only differentials you ever have in FPL, have not really played off. So De Bruyne, obviously 2 assists, that's great for 12 points. But most people have got Guardiol, he's got 27, not fantastic. And Lewis Dunk's just been subbed off at half time with 0 points, who came in for me. Yeah, fantastic. He was the guy who came in for Gusto to facilitate Jackson, who did come in. Livramento, who I bought in 2 weeks ago, instead damage was done then. Didn't play the second game. Apparently he's out for the rest of the season with an injury that Lying Eddie didn't tell us about. Fantastic. So yeah, down to 123k from 106k, 11 points off the top 100k. So I think that we'll be talking about in a bit, as Sam mentioned, some of those break glass sort of differentials.
Yeah,
I'm probably going to need some to make up those 11 points. I'm going to have to bet big, which is not great. I don't like doing this on the last day. It's definitely doable. Is it going to happen? Absolutely not. I have zero faith. I always do terribly whenever I watch football in a live environment with other people. But there's always a chance that things could turn around. Do I believe that? Absolutely not. I think it's going to be an absolute crap show. But it is what it is. It's frustrating. But do I regret going triple City attack? Absolutely not. Do I regret buying Barnes over Gordon 2 weeks ago, which would have netted me in double digits? Absolutely. And do I regret a few other things in this season where I should have just kept it simple? Yes, absolutely. So it's these sort of little things, I think, which ultimately add up, and I think we'll kind of come back to it next week. But just remind me the importance of trying to keep it simple. I largely adhered to it when we were both sort of climbing back from kind of the depths from where we were a few weeks ago. But I think kind of losing sight of those principles perhaps has doomed me to a finish of 6 figures. I mean, it could be a 5-figure finish. I mean, we both said this earlier on today, didn't we, that I'd be ecstatic with a 99k finish at the moment.
Yeah.
I wouldn't just bite your hand off like I'd eat it, and the rest of you offer me that right now. But I mean, yeah, it is what it is, and hopefully this pod will help me think further about what the hell I'm going to do going
Newcastle
forward.
Equalised.
Yeah, right. Okay, so the first thing to do is main league update. So we haven't done this for an awfully long time, but we've got to do it just because we've got a lovely citation needed little trophy, which I will personally send to whoever wins it, no matter where they are in the world. I really, really hope it isn't somewhere ridiculous, but it is a very, very close race at the moment. So first is Jeremy Kalou, who is in Belgium. Led Sarah Shaw, 2605. As it stands, most of these teams are incredibly similar. He is just 2 points ahead of Matthew Allen at the Grand Haven Broncos. Matthew is based in the US. So, I mean, that is obviously a bit of a bigger postage stamp, but yeah, not very far away. And in fact, it's incredibly close because Alexandra Foying, the Red Bulls, who I assume is French. Yes, he's French. Hooray. Is just in third. He is 6 points off of Matthew in second, therefore 8 points off of Jeremy for the first. Lauritz Poost, who delights in the name of 46440 iPhone 12 Pro. Not sure where that's come from, Lauritz. Yeah, very, very catchy. Apparently in Estonia, who is on 109 points this week, and now it's 113, not too far behind Alexandra. In fifth is Martin Janssen, who is, let's see where he is. Is he going to be in the Nordics? Yes, he is. He's in Sweden. So yes, 2588. Again, not very far behind Laritz, just 6, and therefore kind of within striking distance of top. As is Emilio at Snake FPL. Hi Snakey, South Africa. Could I be sending it there? 140 pointer this week on his bench boost. What a legend! Yeah, not doing too badly at all. Nor is Timothy Miamba in 7th. Again, doing great. Where is Timothy? Well, Timothy's actually absolutely smashed it. He wasn't in the top 10 before, so he must have come up a long way. Can't find you. Sorry, mate. I'll find you if I'd send you the trophy, or I'll read it off at the end of the time. In 8th is Vangelos Nikolopoulos, who I assume is going to be Greek, just taking a wild guess at that. 5 points behind Timothy. Again, 131 on bench boost. In 9th, it's Hey T.A. Arnold, Matt Heath, 126 points. And running up top 10, Klops and Robbers, Aaron Butler, 128 points, just one behind Matthew. And there's a plethora of people as well lurking outside the top 10. There's literally loads of places this could possibly go, honestly.
All around the world.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that most of the time we have one person who runs away with it. It's definitely not the case at the moment. I mean, Jeremy and Matthew, the top 2, it's literally kind of like 6 points between them and the chasing pack, I'd say. And there's no big sort of drop off. So yeah, it could literally go anywhere, and we'll update you next Tuesday when we pod again. And if it is you who wins, do send me a DM on Twitter, and I will be sending the trophy your way. Cool. All right.
Fantastic.
The boldest of bold claims. I actually think I might have scored again.
I think you have. Yeah.
It takes me to 9-7, unless there's some sort of heroics. Dallo scores a hat trick in the second half, which is definitely going to happen.
That would still be a defender.
It would, exactly. So I think that, there's no way I can lose here. So my bold claim this week was that a defender is the highest double game week scorer. Yes,
looking good.
It's Guardiol, who I didn't own. So I will. That's like the worst of consolation prizes ever. Honestly, that's like just being. Anyway,
I'll buy you a pint. Don't worry.
Thank you, mate. And you had João Pedro outscoring Nick Jackson. It's still going actually. So
it's still technically possible. Yeah, I mean, it seems unlikely at this point. Although he only needs 2 quick returns in the second half to make it doable. But yeah, I mean. As soon as João Pedro was injured, I gave up on that dream. I knew that you were going to be winning the bold claims this year, so well done.
We shall see. Maybe you can do a really bold one that if it does come off. I mean, I don't know what your bold claim is.
I have gone for something that has never been done before in bold claims.
Okay, all right. Maybe if it does come off, we can call it a tie, as long as mine doesn't come out. Obviously, how bold is it? Come on, reveal it.
Let's do it. So, hinting a little bit at what we are going to be talking about in just a moment's time, I'm going to go for a feat that has never been done, as far as I can tell, in Premier League history, and that is 40 goals on the last day of the season. So that is an average of 4 goals a game. I don't think that's ever been done. I'm pretty confident because you've pulled the numbers, and I looked through them earlier. And I actually wrote this before checking those numbers, and it just so happens that it's just about a record as well. So yeah, I'm feeling a lot of goals. And looking at the matchups, there's some really good ones where the teams with something to play for are probably going to have to go for goals, and the teams without anything to play for are also playing another team without anything to play for. So I quite like it. I think it is bold because it's never happened before. Don't know whether it's worth 2 points, but yeah, I can see it happening. Could be fun at meets.
I think I'm going to give you that if that happens. I mean, nice. I'm going to love that. So I'll give you 2 points. Mine is a bit more pedestrian. Both teams to score in exactly 9 games. Arsenal being the sole clean sheet. That is literally it. FPL just Comfort said in the chat, I love his predictions on my Form Game Week 38. Yes, it is an absolute, like, just.
It's just crazy. Every year it's crazy.
It's a crapshoot. It's going to be absolutely fantastic, hopefully. But yeah, we see this all the time. So turn the page to final day general thoughts. There are a lot of goals. I used to, every year, for long-term listeners, I used to update every year, and the whole pod be themed about walking down memory lane, looking through the goals scored, recounting the fixtures and our experiences. We'll do a little bit of that. But the beauty of the saturation environment is that loads of people have already done the same calculations I used to do and figured out exactly what the situation is. So yeah, upshot, as you'll remember from years gone by, is that there are loads of goals scored on the final day. Hooray! Compared to the average. This year, though, is ridiculous. There are a ridiculous amount of goals scored per game compared to prior seasons. Every week this season has basically been game week 38. So this year, correct to game week 36, there have been 3.27 goals per game. We all feel this through owning defenders this year and looking at it thinking, what a crap fest this is, compared to 2.8 being the average for the last few years per game. So 2.85 in 2023, 2.82 in 21-22, 2.69 in 2021. Add that to the fact that this year, compared to other years, this is the first year that I can remember that there's pretty much nothing to play for across the league. I can't think of anything, Sam, that would really be constituting a must. Maybe there's some kind of manifestation where Chelsea could get the Europa League or something. I don't really know.
Chelsea could overtake Spurs if the results hold from tonight. So they've got the better goal difference than Spurs. They're 3 points back. The only problem is who Spurs are playing on the final day of the season.
Yeah, okay. I remember James and Planet FPL said that they'd scored I think it was 18 goals or something ridiculous over the
13 in the last 3. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, so a lot of goals have been scored. But yeah, oh God, Sam, oh, you're in the mud there. Oh, there's another goal, Sam. There's another goal.
Oh,
wow. There's so many. It's 2-1 Man United. Is it Dallo? Has Dallo done the goal?
He might.
No, I don't think he has. So I don't know. FPL wise, what does this all mean? It's Ahmad with a belter. What does this mean for us on the final day? Is it literally an absolute crapshoot? How do we even begin to think about this from a reason point of view? Or is it simply that we just, whatever the vibes are, we go with them?
Yeah, so I think there is method to the madness of game week 38, and it's tough because it's almost impossible to figure out what the method is, but in retrospect it always kind of does become clear. The tough game that we're playing here is trying to predict which teams are going to be fired up by motivations, or which teams are going to kind of not necessarily just sit within themselves because their season's done, versus the teams that, okay, just because their season's done, like Palace, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to be just kind of let loose, and therefore that can also be a positive thing, not just a negative thing. So for example, Palace, I'll come back to them again now, they very much do seem like a team that, okay, great form, they haven't had anything to play for weeks, so you've got a little bit of a sample size on what they could be like on the final day of the season. At home, in front of Selhurst Park, a few players might be going out on top for the final time. That could be a good team to be targeting, for instance, but they wouldn't be the only one. Obviously, Forest as well, that despite being away from home, they're almost not quite guaranteed safe, but about as close to guaranteed as you can get. Will they play with a bit of freedom? Quite possibly. But again, these things can also go completely the opposite direction. And a team like Villa, who, okay, they're in a celebratory mood. They've got Champions League, amazing. They have hobbled over the line a little bit recently. And it is knowing that they finally made it to the finish line, going to relieve a bit of pressure. They're going to play without any sort of friction or worried about what is sort of over their shoulder, or are they basically just done for the season regardless? You just can't really tell going in, but you've got to take some punts on these kind of eye test narratives that we're going to play out on. I think you've just got to back a few of them and go with it.
I mean, it's making windows into men's souls almost, isn't it? I mean,
it's tough,
there's very, very little to play for, if at all. And that then leads me to think, the environment, our teams who are going to be at home for the final game of the season, slightly more kind of interesting in terms of us targeting them. We'll go through the players in a minute when we look at kind of best transfers in break, glass, and emergency. But you start to look at kind of vibe-led things, which a lot of people aren't going to like.
Home games and that kind of thing.
It's that time of year, people. I mean, honestly, that's the way it is at this moment. So is it stuff like Arsenal with their salutatory performance? Yeah, we haven't won it this year, but let's sign off. Everton completely. We're safe. It's fine. I think the last few home games have been routes for us versus Everton. So is that going to kind of show again? Another good example, you mentioned them, Palace versus spent Aston Villa, who have to much to Ollie Watkins' chagrin, it seems, if you saw the video, have qualified for the Champions League. I think that's because he's a big gooner. But Crystal Palace, who are on fire, and their manager, who wasn't allowed to move to Bayern Munich, could there be some opportunity there? And when we talk about sentiment, Liverpool, a home versus Wolves. I heard Jonathan Wilson on the Garden Foot Week say this the third time in the last 4 seasons they've faced Wolves on the final day. Spent Wolves, who are still missing Dawson, who's making all the difference there. I mean, having a bit of that could well be something that you'd be interested in. But for me, I don't know about you, but if I was making any transfers before we dig into specifics, everything I think would be kind of focused around buying home players in a situation like this, where that's the only thing really. Even stuff like goal targets, like if we had like a race to the golden boot that we had last year, there may be some sort of intrigue in that, but it doesn't seem like even that exists. So it feels like squarely around sort of home players that are going to be of interest, maybe with the kind of exception of Sheffield United versus Spurs. What do you make of that?
No, I think you're completely right. I think home fixtures, going out on top again in front of your home crowd, especially if you've had a bit of a long season or you're celebrating a really good achievement, a really big achievement for the season. So, for example, City obviously goes without saying. They're going to be massive favourites to beat West Ham by probably quite a big margin. If they go 1 or 2 up, they've still got a week before their next cup final. So they're probably going to leave their best players on and just make it into a bit of a parade, in my personal opinion. Then looking down my list as well at some of the top break glass and emergency kind of players, I think almost all of them are playing at home this week. And I don't think that's a coincidence. The majority of the home teams have decent fixtures, or at least are playing against teams with very little to play for as well. So there's a lot of mini narratives. I think one exception to the home rule, actually maybe 2, if I may. One might be Ollie Watkins, away, but on 19 goals for the season. I think he's going to want that 20th, and that's a very, very small narrative, but a striker bases his season on numbers, and I reckon there's something riding on him getting to 20. So I wouldn't be surprised if he bags 1 or 2. I think that game will be quite high scoring. And then again, I always like thinking about Chris Wood as well, being, until recently, I think the best at converting chances in the Premier League. And ever since that, he's, I think, missed 4 straight XG on the trot without scoring a goal. So if anyone was ever due, he could probably do a good job against Burnley away from home, who again have just been shipping goals. So those are the 2 exceptions to the rule, but I think those kind of prove the rule in a way, because those are the only 2 I can really muster at the moment. And all of the other picks that we'll come on to, I think basically home narrative, playing with a bit of freedom, or going hell for leather, trying to rack up the goal difference in potentially the final game of the season.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I mean, in terms of the Klopp thing, Kieran in the chat seems to be reading my notes. But I was going to say that in Wenger's last game for Arsenal, 5-0, I think we beat Burnley that day 5-0. And then I think it was Huddersfield's last game seems to come to mind as being the last game. And Ferguson's last game was the 5-5 with Lukaku leading West Brom to that. And I think he famously afterwards, I've been involved in many games. There's never been a 5-5. Will we see that in the Wolves game? I don't think so. But stranger things have happened, and I suppose that at the end of the day, you're going to be looking at obviously leveraging those hauls. That's what you're looking at. You're looking to try to get to those points where there are going to be the explosions, and you want a bit of that pie. As it stands, there's not many teams who are sat with a Liverpool player. A lot of teams coming out of double game week 37 probably will have one Arsenal player, maybe two, and both of them are likely to be located in defence. If you had Saka, yeah, I mean, we were both ranting and raving, but if you've come away from the United game with Saka dropping a bit of a poor performance and limping off with 2 points, then maybe you also have sort of valid considerations surrounding that. But yeah, there's definitely, as you said, loads of sort of mini narratives that still exist, but it's nonetheless. I can't help but think that we are just kind of putting tickets into a raffle, really, with this one.
Always,
if we're looking at kind of home games, we're looking at kind of bookies odds surrounding these things, and small things, as you said, like Watkins maybe trying to get to 20. I mean, that's definitely one thing, but on the other side of it, you may be thinking, oh well, they are pretty spent, so maybe on the other side of it, Palace may want to finish well. Other things that possibly cropped up in the past, Sam, that come to mind for me, players looking for moves. In the near future, players coming to the end of their contracts. You also have players who potentially are looking to get into the Euro team, obviously. I Mateta is an example of that, who has been linked to being on the fringes of the French team in terms of having call-up, and also is being oddly linked to Napoli to replace Osimhen, which I did double take on. I mean, obviously, that's just usual transfer rumour stuff. But there's always these sort of narratives that you could also feed into it as well. So maybe by that, you could look at sort of someone from Burnley or someone from Luton and think, oh, you know what? I don't know what you'd be thinking, really. I think you have to really have gone down the rabbit hole, wouldn't you, to be like, oh yeah, well, Carlton Morris, he's going to want to be on Ipswich's radar. I don't know, Burnley.
There are so many hidden narratives as well. That's the thing. Like you say, like there will be players who maybe their agents been like tapped up by another rival club recently that we just won't have known about or won't have heard about. So yeah, there's many narratives that we won't be privy to at the moment that will probably come to light after the matches are done. But at the moment, I think most of us are pretty well set up, and it's basically just finding that one, maybe two punts that just feel good on the narrative. And I think more so than any other game week, in fact, probably the one game week where I'd actually put sentiment into your rational decision making. This is the week to do that. I remember, was it a few seasons ago? Was it was either the Aguero retiring or transferring season rather?
It was. Was it the Aguero retirement, which was a brace on the last day coming off the bench?
Yeah, that was something like that. Yeah. And just those little narratives build. And I think there is room, more so than in any other game week, for that little bit of sentiment. Like, for example, Lallana's leaving Brighton. That's been announced. He'll probably start the game or get minutes in the game. And whilst that probably isn't a player that anyone's realistically going to be considering, he's probably going to just give that like 5-10% more than he would normally, and at least we know that he is very likely to get minutes, because, well, I haven't even checked if he's fit, to be honest. He might be injured. He's so irrelevant FPL wise, I haven't checked. But if he was fit and he's ready to start, he probably will get decent minutes. And there are going to be loads of little players and picks like that again, the narratives are different for each player, but they'll have their own little private motivations. It's just trying to figure out what they might be and trying to nail one or two of them. Because sentiment does have a place in game week 38.
I mean, and that's the thing, isn't it? Like, you're looking for like a Roberto Firmino last day, like you know he's going to score at home in front of the Kop.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Looking down the list of home players, where that's going to come. The other thing that kind of comes to mind is that Nkunku's just scored, for example. So that's kind of prompted me to think about it, like a player setting up for next year.
Yeah,
the sort of like Ahmad. Sort of, I know they're away against Brighton, but I mean he comes to mind as well, having just scores. Yes, hello, hot take City. But players like that, I think, may be worth it. The only sort of mini narrative I can think of is maybe Foden, at home against West Ham. We talk about him in the captaincy section, but widely tipped to win the Premier League Player of the Year. Could an impresario performance there cement that nomination? But we will need to see. Right. Okay. How many hits would you take, Sam? Would you take a hit this week? Depending on, I think it depends heavily on where you are. So if you're just outside the top 100k, so you want to finish the top 100k, or you're just outside top 50k, I guess it's maybe the case you kind of trust your team. But say you kind of want to have a bit of fun, or I suppose that kind of means limits off. But what's okay, do you think, this week?
So I don't want to preach or anything like that, because I've taken hits on the last game week of the season and it's actually paid off. It's just it needs a word of warning, because hits when there are no future game weeks to make up those points mean that you immediately need whoever you're bringing in to get some sort of attacking return, or obviously in defense need them to get the clean sheet. And especially if you're a defender, you also need whoever you're taking out to basically get 2 or ideally less points to guarantee that paying off. So hits are harder to make work this game week. And I think looking at most people's teams, generally, because a lot of people, I think 80% of the top 100k bench boosted, for instance, this week, most of us have at least 13 or 14 players that are maybe not ideal for this week, but are decent, and they're starting matches and they've got attacking upside. They're good picks generally week to week. And fortunately enough, a lot of those picks have also got decent fixtures this week as well. And a few of them also will still have plenty of motivation. Man City, Arsenal, both 100% going to be putting out their strongest lineups. You've got Chelsea, Newcastle, Man United, all still technically something to play for in all of those cases. So you'd imagine they put out strong lineups. Tottenham as well. The players that we've got, I'd be very surprised if they got benched. So all of that is to basically say that most of us will have a good starting 11 without having to do anything, even a transfer with our side. So taking a hit is kind of battling against your original side, and it's quite difficult to make it pay off in comparison to, okay, fine, I like this player over the next 3 or 4 weeks. I think it will pay off, if not this week, over the next 3 or 4. It's kind of, you've got to get on with it now. And there aren't many players out there that I think, okay, the upside is there, unless you're really chasing and unless you're bringing in a player that has good upside and is a potential captaincy shout for you. And there are 1 or 2 of them. That is a bit of a needle mover, and that can be your last minute Hail Mary. But sometimes the best play is just playing sensible and letting other people make the mistake for you, and that can be your marginal gain instead.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think a lot of the time it places the emphasis solely on one game and places you at the mercy of luck / variance, doesn't it, a lot of the time?
Yeah.
But I can see why people just think, screw it, I'm going to go for it if you're in that situation, right? So if I'm in with me, like, right on the precipice, like needing to make up what I think is like 9 points or 10 points or whatever it's going to work out at. I mean, that's going to be definitely something that I'm going to look at and think, I've got to kind of go for it. And maybe you do kind of take the penalty of losing 4 points to make that sort of work. But yeah, I mean, it's very much kind of down to your individual situation, which is obviously not the sexiest thing to say, but it's certainly true as well. And we'll talk about captaincy in just a bit as well, because obviously that is always an edge on what you can gain. So let's turn page to best transfers in this week. And obviously break glass in case of emergency for some people. So if you are kind of thinking like Sam, maybe you'll just be like, you know what, it's probably okay. And as you said, a lot of people make the mistake of kind of taking these sorts of wild punts, and there are no more wild punts than making goalkeeper transfers.
Oh yeah,
And
exciting.
that does feel like an area that you're very excited by this week. There are definitely some noises from the Price camp, that there were some that goalkeepers are what is your bag right now.
Yeah.
Edson doesn't look good again. Is Ortega the man to be brought in here?
The hero of the season, I'm hearing everyone say on Twitter at the moment. Although I think that was more to do with Son's finishing in that particular moment. But anyway, yeah, I think goalkeeper transfers are obviously, look, it's as boring as it comes. But like I just said, a lot of us do have a very strong 11 or at least 10 outfielders this week, and there's not a ton of players where I'd say there's like, okay, very clear upside gain of bringing them in attacking positions. One position that I'm not particularly confident with is goalkeepers this week. I've got Petrovic at home to Bournemouth, and I've also got Onana against Brighton. I don't really massively fancy either of them for a clean sheet, but I still have an Arsenal spot. So if I wanted to go with, but definitely the best chance of a clean sheet this week statistically, just bring in Raya, hope that they do keep Everton out, who again aren't exactly potent in front of goal, and just take what is likely to be some upside, as boring and as marginal as it is, of maybe a couple extra points from having Raya than Petrovic or Onana, and just hoping that neither of them do end up keeping the clean sheet. It is so boring. And if there are other more exciting moves I could make, but it would mean benching someone else who does have decent upside, and that can always bite you. So I'm just a little bit nervous about that. And I think the one position I do have where I'm like, I don't really mind selling that player, I don't think there's a decent chance of them returning, is in goal. And looking around, like you said with your bold claim, I can't really call a clean sheet this week outside of Arsenal at home to Everton. And even that is obviously its last day. It's a bit random. You never know. But I think that's the best chance by far of a clean sheet. So I don't mind it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's fine. If that is your, it's one of those things you'll forget about it, but you kind of feel like on the day you'd be like, oh, that's not exciting, is it? Just making a goalkeeper transfer. But if you're in the situation where you're happy with the rest of your team and you just think, you know what, I don't fancy Petrovic versus Bournemouth. I assume most people have got him looking at the effective ownership. Then, yeah, fine. No, absolutely fine. It's always random, and as we kind of heard earlier on, the goals per game this season mean there's absolutely no kind of upside benefit anywhere. But if you are killing off the double Arsenal clean sheet threat to your rank, if you don't own Raya or double Arsenal defense, then if you're in the situation where everything else is hunky dory, then absolutely, I don't hate it at all. I don't hate it. Don't particularly like it, but if there's nothing else that you can do, then I don't hate it. And if I was in your situation, Sam, then I'd be absolutely fine with doing that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's so boring. But if you're doing it for a free transfer and there's nothing else to do, then it's marginal gains, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not one of the things you're going to look back on fondly.
No.
Maybe it's a bit of a badge of honor. It's like, you've done 16 points, hit the last week, and this week I'm going to take a
reverse it
on the final day.
Oh God,
dear me, this is definitely not doing wonders for your burgeoning reputation as the dullest man in FPL Twitter. I'm kidding.
I have to do something to spice it up.
Yeah. No, exactly. Minus 16, that is not dull at all. Right, defender-wise, along this sort of same route, Arsenal defenders back in surely has got to be, the way. I note that obviously people buying in Gvardiol is the top thing. I think he's actually the top player this week, almost 100,000 transfers in for the Croatian. But Ben White is kind of 300,000 transfers in, likes of Saliba as well, and Gabriel kind of hitting a little bit, but nothing like the Gvardiol kind of purchases. So 95,000 transfers for Gvardiol, not 150,000. I mean, Is there anything else? I mean, if you were able to get there, could Trent be an option here in
He's on my
defence?
list. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Again, we'll go on to the Liverpool narrative against Wolves. I expect in the midfield section even more, but yeah, I do quite fancy Trent. Again, a high upside defender. There aren't many of those. Wolves have looked very poor recently. They've really crawled over the line in recent weeks, and that's not necessarily their fault. They've had injuries to deal with. It has been a difficult season, and they've done well, but they do look like a team that needs the summer break now. And Liverpool at home in front of the Klopp's last game, I expect a big performance from them, and I think Trent as about as differential as they come for a player that has in the past been one of the number one picks in FPL. I think it's easy to forget that after, again, quite a long season for them, but he could still be relevant. And I could see it happening. I can see him turning back the clocks a year or so and being that kind of asset once more. Clean sheet's definitely on the cards, and all it takes is one attack and return, and you're looking at a big haul, and not many defenders have that in them.
No, definitely not. Definitely Reece James just been sent off.
Has he? He was my third pick, so well, that's ruined that.
Straight red. He's kicked your boy João Pedro.
How? Actually, no, that's fine. That's fine. I've sold him.
He's fit. He's fine. Reece James is just kind of just thinking, you know what, I'm going to relax and just have the summer off. So next season he's going to miss game week 1 as well.
I'm so glad that's happened like 20 or 30 seconds before I recommended him as an FPL pick. So, that is very good.
Ultimate backpedal. Oh yeah, no, he's great. Blah blah blah. The ability, him being able to get on the ball like that and cross the ball in, like what a player is. Oh, hang on, yeah, he's been sent off. Yeah, apparently Argentina. Dave Beckham's Argentina type foul there.
Wow. That is so classic Reece James. He is becoming like the troll of all trolls. So yeah. Wow.
Yeah, still loads of people who'll go for it. But yeah, banned for game week 1 next season. But he'll be back for game week 2 for those who start in game week 2. Nick Jackson's just been subbed as well. So yeah, due to that red card. There we go. Meh. Right. Meh. Turn the pace midfield then. Lots of options on offer here. As I said earlier on, if you're coming out double game week first 7, didn't own Saka, unlike Sam, you didn't take like a very large hit during which you'd be getting in a Havertz or something like that. Arsenal mids have to be on the running order. I guess that maybe Kai is probably top of that right now. Saka, who's having a bit of an off period, maybe carrying injury, maybe I don't know, not quite at the races. Trossard's on the list, but you're only getting 60 minutes before Martinelli comes on, maybe 65 tops. Maybe Declan Rice could be in the equation if you're thinking that we're going to score 5 goals or so. I'm sure that there's going to be a corner or a set play or something. If he's at left-sided 8, there's always a chance for him. Elise or Eze versus Spent Villa definitely is gathering traction, and it's mentioned in the chat already. But alongside an obvious kind of Salah for the final day for Klopp, the two of their fates being intertwined over the time that Salah has been at Liverpool, there could also be Luis Diaz, who could be on the list. There are a few other players potentially who might be on the transfer in list for people, but I suspect those are probably the long and short of it, Sam. Let's turn our attention to Arsenal first. So lots will be looking at Arsenal midfielders. I think that's almost definitely going to be the case, with zero real sort of interest in the strikers. I think at the moment we'll look at them in a minute. But Havertz is being bought the most, then Odegaard, then Trossard, and you have to kind of cycle quite a long way down before you see Saka, who admittedly has been flagged.
Yeah,
but only bought in by 10,000 or so people at the moment. I mean, as a Havertz owner, I assume you're obviously pretty happy. Would you be advocating people to be focusing on buying him in at the moment ahead of the others?
Yeah, I don't think it's cut and dry that he's way ahead. I liked him because he was a bit cheaper. I could get to him easier than I could get to Saka, and I was chasing. So I think my mentality on Arsenal midfielders it would very much be how much are you chasing. If you're pretty comfortable with where you're at, I would be stunned if Saka didn't start last game of the season. Okay, he's carrying something, fine. He's still on penalties. He's still got great data. It is boring, and I understand that completely, and it won't be the most exciting thing you'll ever hear on a podcast, but the guy does get points. He's one of the top point scorers this year. He will get a price hike next year. Enjoy him at this price while you can. And at the end of the day, like, even without playing well, a bit like Salah, he just finds routes to goals or to points generally. So I would not advocate for going against Saka if you're in a comfortable position. If you're not in a comfortable position, I think there are enough factors going against him that you could reasonably punt on one of the others and hope that everything we're seeing with our eyes does come to fruition in game week 38. And that is basically what I'm doing with Havertz. He has looked very good recently. He's playing out of position up front and getting plenty of chances, but also he's dropping into nice little pockets of space in wide areas, like he did against Man United, the goal being a great example, dragging Casemiro into a completely offside position somehow from across the pitch, but dragging players out of position and also creating space in central areas for the likes of Trossard to get in front of goal and creating those chances for them. So I really like Havertz. He's getting very good minutes now. And yeah, I can't really say much more than that. I bought him, so that is my endorsement. But I definitely wouldn't look past Trossard either. I think he is also a pretty good punt, but you have to really hope that he makes it worth the while in 65 minutes. Yeah, that's it. That's the problem.
Yeah, 66% in the game, and the other two players, Havertz and maybe Saka, maybe maybe Rice, if you are kind of trying to facilitate a Salah or something, they're going to get 33% more game time. As you said earlier on, I don't really see us having that kind of final day anyone could play sort of scenario going on.
No.
I think it will be the fact that we'll be going for it. So yeah, I think it has to be kind of Kai, Saka, and maybe kind of Trossard or Rice for the X-Mins, really. Trossard's been a big game. Leo has been showing up in these sort of these moments that we really need him.
4 in the last 5 in the league, I think now. Yeah.
So he's likely to be productive if you do bring him in the minutes that you get. But if it doesn't come, then you haven't really got kind of much. Like if he hasn't scored by half time almost, and you're kind of counting the minutes until the punt's a failure. Whereas with Havertz and Saka, you don't really have that. And I think it's probably just, it feels more comfortable, I guess, to be buying in Havertz or Saka. Saka's talisman, etc., on penalties, bit off it. I think it's got to be said recently, but as we've seen, limps off every game, absolutely fine in the next game, and very kind of shades of Eden Hazard about him. I think is true to say, but Havertz has to be the man. Speaking to a Chelsea fan in my team, as in my work team earlier on, who was kind of saying, "Oh, you bought Havertz from us on 65 million. Doesn't really watch much football." And me and another Arsenal fan, I'm like, "Yeah, thank you very much for that." What a player!
That's gone quite well.
Yeah, has gone very well. One of those players who next year I think will be filling a bit of a void in the striker slots once more. Crystal Palace, Elise Elise is the second most bought player in this week, Sam. We both sort of didn't buy on our bench boosts, so on our free hits. For us, it was Dean Henderson. I mean, both players who we spoke about them earlier on, and I'm a bit perplexed I didn't mention them really in the kind of who knows about what they want for their future, but both players who are potentially in the window for a potential transfer, but also kind of players who, when they play together, when Palace have those two, and Matata we'll speak about in a minute, on the pitch together, have under Glasner really flourished. I can see why there's a lot of interest in both of them, but particularly Elise, who has been really storming recently.
Yeah, and I think with Palace in particular, there isn't necessarily a narrative in their corner, but they've been lacking a narrative for several weeks now and still been performing really well. Obviously, there's the shop window stuff, but I think mainly it's to do with Villa. And I think the fact that now they have kind of gotten over the line for the Champions League, they are looking knackered. I just wonder how much they're going to be able to raise themselves again to play a very informed Palace side. So yeah, I think this is the fixture that I think like a lot of us are looking at and thinking, okay, that they are picks that are going to remain fairly differential. Yes, they're being bought by a lot of managers, but not to the extent that they're going to be template picks, I don't think. And they're both putting up really good data as well. Obviously, Eze's got the benefit of penalties, but Elise's numbers have been absolutely phenomenal. I think he's averaging over a return per 90 in the league this season, obviously in limited minutes. But when he's played, he has looked like he's gone up yet another level. And I think we'd all be quite surprised if big clubs or bigger clubs come sniffing for him over the summer. And I think there could be a bit of a bidding war on our hands with him in mind in particular. So again, bit of shop window there perhaps, but in my view, it's more about Villa and the fact that Palace, just generally speaking, have looked really, really solid, despite not necessarily having too much to play for in recent weeks.
No, I feel you. The Chelsea clean sheet has gone the 98th minute.
Yeah, very frustrating.
Oh dear. Well, João Pedro's just got the assist for that. I don't know if he's gonna get any bonus, but you could be in for your bold claim there. If he does get.
Oh yeah, well that would be great.
It's 5 versus 7, I think. So if he's done enough to get free bonus out of that. Yeah, but yeah, in terms of going back to Elise versus Eze, yeah, I mean Eze's on penalties, but yeah, I mean Elise, as you said, has got an underlying numbers, and I think that I can completely understand why people are really looking at him. Could be another one, of course, as we've kind of both covered, who could be impacted by thinking about what's going on with his future. Could he do better than Palace? With all due respect to Palace, and I think the opposition as well is definitely worth bearing in mind. Like, accomplished what they need to accomplish for this year, really, and I think that's going to be more than enough for them. So yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely fine as a punt, as a buy-in. And finally, Liverpool, Salah, Diaz. I mean, Salah's probably going to be quite a hard proposition for a lot of people. It's going to be difficult for people to get there. But is there kind of an option really to kind of go with Diaz or something like that? I mean, it's Klopp's last game, and you said earlier on that you factor in sentimentality more in this game than any other week. Surely there's some interest with buying one of these guys, or maybe even one of the forwards who we'll speak about in a minute.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit more of a narrative on this game than there are on a lot of others, even though Liverpool obviously have nothing to play for other than the fact that they want to give their manager a really good send-off. And they have got the best attacking data in the league this season as well. So there's a lot going for them. Again, the team that they're playing, very little to play for and haven't looked good recently. So yeah, I think if you can get to a Liverpool player, they're one of the differentials. So Diaz, obviously very differential. Salah will be also pretty differential. Don't let the overall ownership percentage fool you. He's not in any teams in the top 500k pretty much. I think he's like 5, maybe 10% owned at most. And I think going back a little bit on what I was saying about hits earlier on, Salah is probably the one exception I would give to that. I think if you're chasing and you fancied him as a captaincy shout, that's where I'd probably be likely to try and force a hit just to be different enough and hope that he explodes and obviously Haaland doesn't. That could be the difference maker because he's one of those picks that could fairly consistently 3, 4, 5 times a season get up to 15, 20 points. And if you catch Haaland on an off day, that can make the difference up. So that might be one place where I'd be willing to take a hit if I was really, really trying to force it. But otherwise, Diaz, absolutely fine as a pick. Just obviously not quite as explosive. So couldn't really come into the captaincy conversation in the same way, in my opinion.
Fair enough. I think that there's definitely kind of some leverage in thinking about Liverpool players for this final day.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that most midfields are kind of set. Really, I mean, Bruno's played tonight, and that's obviously kind of him, Foden, Palmer, Son. I think is your four, assuming that there's Jackson, Haaland, and Isak up front. I mean, it come back to your point earlier on about looking at goalkeepers. It kind of feels like you're differentiating to hope for a differential within that sort of area where you're taking on a player, where there's kind of a fair bit of risk involved. I mean, I'm interested in Diaz just because De Bruyne raked down the back of his ankle last night, which obviously led to him being subbed off the Doku a little bit earlier. So I've potentially got that spot available. I'll talk about it in a minute, but there's definitely kind of a word of caution from us to just wait until the last minute in terms of making transfers, because there are so many risks this week in terms of potential last minute dropouts. But I mean, it's one of those again where you look at that with a Diaz character versus a character like Elise, who, as you said, has all the underlying numbers and is playing. I mean, either of them. And it comes back to what I said earlier on. It depends on where you get the vibes, effectively. Elise, it feels like a fun pick. Diaz feels like a fun pick. Where is the max fun out of those two? I know that sounds awful, and throughout the course of the season, we've given you lots of concrete, well-reasoned
arguable.
Yeah, maybe. But we've given you lots of sort of hopefully concretely reasoned points in terms of why you might pick a player. But for this, if you're looking at a 50-50 like that, it's almost, I don't know, it feels a bit sort of like, where do you think the sentiment lies? Yeah, where's throw a dart, see what happens. Where's the most fun, do you think? And I think going full circle to the very start of the season, Sam, on your very first pods with me, we moved to the forwards instead of Liverpool.
Yeah,
Cody Gakpo, who over the last 3 game weeks has registered an XGI of over 0.5 per game, slowly ticking up. Isak not at the races, apparently a bit ill, dealing with the effects of a bit of a cough or whatever. But it's certainly one of those players who seems to have supplanted Darwin. And if you don't fancy Isak on this final day, if you think, you know what, okay, Gordon, I'm going to play him. Or you think that, you know what, I'm going to go without Newcastle away from home, so a different proposition. I think that he might be a bit of an interesting, fun pick. One of those guys who could make all the difference that no one's going to own, but you've got a kind of a stake in the Klopp last day pie. Could he be one, Sam, that you'd be looking at? I mean, he's certainly what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'd be surprised if many other podcasts this week are recommending Gakpo, but I think you're onto something there. It does look like he's got the starting
cute
spot.
Every other podcast.
Yeah, now they
Gakpo,
will.
Where's like the photo?
No, that's
the one that everyone's going to overlook this week.
Yeah, that is Elise this week. I don't think he'll be overtaking Elise for that one, but maybe one or two will start mentioning him now. You can lead the bandwagon for Cody Gakpo, and yeah, I do think there are merits to it. He is a good striker. Liverpool, again, as we've already mentioned with Salah and Diaz, are the best attack in the league statistically, at least, and the fixture's great. I think the only problem is that there's always a decent chance of him coming off early. So a bit like Trossard, you've got to kind of hope that he does stay on for a bit longer. It's obviously not as locked in as Trossard that he definitely goes off at 65, 70. But last home game and last game for Klopp, you'd imagine he uses his squad a little bit, and the non-essential players probably just get mixed in and out around the 60-minute mark, you would think. But yeah, I do really like Gakpo. I think that is a differential not many people are going to go with. He has got explosive potential, and he's in a great attack as well. So yeah, I can't really argue against it. And it does come full circle from one of our first podcasts. So perfect.
Yeah. The FPL Pricey YouTube channel launch video. Let's put Gakpo in just because it's something different.
Yeah, didn't really work
Nostalgia.
out.
Someone's got to own in this year. Fuck it, I might as well be me. Elsewhere, Mateta, as I mentioned, on radar for a France call-up, linked with Napoli to replace Osimhen, apparently. I don't know. It's a summer transfer rumor, isn't it? Also on the list, and you're looking to get Wood potentially.
We nearly made it a whole season without that.
I know.
Yeah. I don't think he's realistically going to be one of my transfers in unless like Isak is takes a step back, is ill for the final game week. But I do like it for the upside. Not many people are going to own him. He has Burnley and Forest are probably going to let loose a little bit, you'd think. And again, he's actually statistically done quite well on the XG. I think it's 0.58 per 90, which is obviously pretty healthy for a forward of his price point. So, yeah, differential, unlikely most people go there. And all things being said, it's unlikely that there's a necessity for me to go there either. But I certainly wouldn't completely rule him out. And if you want to go different and with a bit of upside, we know he's got hat-trick potential in him. So yeah, Burnley away from home, albeit I still think that's a decent fixture for them, and I'd be surprised if Chris Wood didn't get something from that.
Yeah. Maybe one exception to the home guys rule. I'm not sure I'd be going there. I think you again have to be kind of quite far down the rabbit hole if you decided that he would be the man. Earlier on, there's lots of kind of points / returns / goals left at the table for Wood. So maybe he could be there. Is that our knee? Is he fit? Back to fitness? I think that might be a deciding factor potentially.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, I think he might be. I've got a feeling he is. I think he
could play them both.
Yeah. I mean, he's off the bench. He's been on the bench a couple of times. Obviously, kind of. I think after kind of 1 minute and 4 minutes off the bench over the last couple of games, I think you're probably okay. But yeah, another ultra differential there. But I still quite like Mateta. I like Gakpo. I think a lot of the time it kind of comes down to who you're taking out more than anything, doesn't it? Because I mean, we've spoken about this already, and I've mentioned it. But if you have that sort of regimented front seven of Bruno, Foden, Palmer, Son, Jackson, Haaland, Isak, where do you really go? Like realistically, if you're kind of just going to take a step back from, it's game week 38, screw it, I might as well just go all in. If you take a step back from that and you think, you know what, all of these players, I mean, Bruno got an assist earlier on for Højlund. Where am I going to realistically make a difference here outside of obviously some sort of news at the very end? I think it comes back to what you were saying earlier on, Sam, that a lot of the time it's worth remembering and just kind of having that sort of breath and thinking, actually, we've all come out of double game week 37. Regardless of how well you fared, I fared absolutely flipping terribly. But it's worth kind of taking a step back and thinking that actually I've come out of double game week 37 with a really strong team. And it really comes down to risk appetite, I think. And you'll almost definitely be removing a player. I think the main sort of areas of vulnerability in terms of removing players are Gordon, Isak. Gordon at the moment for me, for example, on the bench. Isak could be the one that I remove for another player because I'd be kind of thinking, I can probably get a positive sort of outcome out of that. Or if there's like a late kind of, if we hear news on Sunday afternoon that X and Y are not playing, it's happened in the past, in the likes of Salah and Trent not playing against Newcastle, I think it was a few years back on the final day out of nowhere. I mean, these sort of things do happen. I think that's going to be where you've got an opportunity to do that. And I said at the very top of the section that, sometimes it is a case of breaking glass in case of emergency. And it may be you are like Sam and thinking, well, you know what? All I've got to do is a goalkeeper transfer because I'm absolutely fine with the rest of my team. That's absolutely fine. But having in mind what you would do if you have to, and we've both been caught out by this threat during the course of this year, and I'm sure you listening will have as well. If you're caught out and there's a moment where you're like, crap, I've got to make a decision, like literally with 5 minutes to spare, it's worth having, hopefully we've helped you think through all the different kind of players that you could potentially bring in midfield. Okay, this player's injured, don't quite fancy that player, I'm going to bench him, I'm going to buy someone else for this player. Having that in mind for who you're going to be buying in that moment of emergency. And I think that's hopefully what we're trying to do here a little bit. And so hopefully that is of use. Haaland, obviously the short captain. If you are really going for it, Sam, say you're 150k. I'm 120k. So I'm thinking about it, 120k, rolling the dice. I mean, what are the alternatives here? And we've spoken a little bit about that already in terms of motivation. So, I mean, I floated the idea of Foden potentially being an interesting captaincy choice. Could add that motivation, knowing that he's going to be, he's going to be player of the year if he does get that kind of good kind of final flourish. Again, reading windows into men's souls, it's very difficult to kind of, for me, to substantiate that claim. It's just something that has kind of cropped into my mind. What kinds of captains are kind of coming to your mind, Sam, as alternatives, assuming that you're not going with the chalk captain, which I think that most people are going to, and hoping the differentials win out for you?
Yeah, it is tough unless you're chasing to go against Haaland, considering the form he's been in recently. But man on the screen next to him, Palmer, I don't mind at all. He's not quite hit the same heights recently as he had done 6-7 weeks ago, but he still looked very good. And Chelsea have looked much more of a coherent unit recently as well. So they're putting together a lot of chances now. Statistically look really strong as well. So do not mind Palmer. He will, of course, be high owned. Not sure. I think he'll be about 105 to 110% EO, bit like this week in the top ranks. So you can take a bit more of a chunk of benefit out of Palmer, perhaps, over Haaland. So that could be one way of playing it. Obviously, I've already mentioned Salah. Not many people have him at the moment. If you really want to roll the dice, bring him in. If you can do it for free, obviously even better, and makes it kind of an obvious move, I think, if it's for free. If it's for a hit, I think it's probably because you're chasing. And if you're chasing that hard that you're willing to take a hit for him, captaincy definitely has to be a consideration for you. And like I mentioned earlier, he's one of the few players that could regularly take on Haaland for big explosive returns. So you never know. You might catch Haaland on an off day. You might be able to regain that on someone like Salah. So don't mind that. You could potentially look at one of the Arsenal midfielders, but I don't think any of them are really taking my fancy too much at the moment. And then after that, you're looking at Spurs probably as the next low-hanging fruit away at Sheffield United, and you're more backing that Sheffield United have just been ridiculously below standard defensively and just all over the pitch all season, and hoping that Spurs put it together. You're probably looking at Son in that instance because of penalties and because of the decent enough underlying data, but he's not looked fantastic recently himself. So it is quite hard to put up a real fight on any of them unless you're particularly chasing. The final one, sorry, just before I finish, I wouldn't have anything against going with Elise or Eze. Genuinely, I think if you're chasing, I think the data's good enough, and I've just got we were talking about it earlier. There's a bit of a vibe on it. There's a bit of a gut feeling. I do kind of fancy it. Yeah.
I think they're all good options. I think it's one of those where you look at it and you just kind of think, if you were to kind of sit down and try to predict the week's fixtures, and I do that for a weekly predictions game that me and a few of the guys on my personal Slack do, where do you think the goals are going to come in the game week? And I think that kind of players like Elise, fun picks like that are going to be the ones that are going to do it for you. I think if in my situation, you know what, like if I go with Haaland, I'm 10 points off top 100k. Go with Haaland and have quite a kind of a standard team. I think I'm not going to make that up. I think I'm going to stay where I am, aren't I? If I kind of just go with
all of your players would have to do quite well to get all of those marginal gains combined to make that difference up. Yeah,
that's it. That's literally it. So you start to really think about it. If you're just a bit off, And if you're kind of beyond a bit off and you're just kind of wanting to have fun, then you've got to be thinking about these sorts of things. There's obviously the Foden idea. So if you look at West Ham versus Man City, we're all expecting loads and loads of goals in that, right? So you kind of be hoping that Foden has a share of the pie, but there is obviously a very, very clear talisman for Man City.
And when Haaland's playing, Foden just isn't. I think a lot of his big hauls have come when Haaland hasn't been playing. And I think that's not just coincidence either. I think that's because when Haaland's in the side, they play with a very key focal point. And Foden, when Haaland's not in the side, kind of takes that up a little bit himself, moves into those pockets of space in and around goal and takes advantage. So yeah, that's one thing.
I think for him as well is De Bruyne.
Yeah, that too.
When De Bruyne was out, Foden was the man. And I think that without there being that kind of absence in terms of the individual creative force that De Bruyne is, then Foden in some places, I mean, remember kind of the start of last season, becomes a goal scoring number 2 deputy to Haaland, but in other cases can be slightly crowded out a little bit. Especially if he plays with Bernardo Silva, and then there's more kind of requirement for Foden to provide a little bit of width potentially, although Gvardiol kind of is performing that role as well. So it's interesting, and I think that you are looking at hoping that other things go your way. So maybe you'd be looking at Liverpool Wolves and hoping for, as was mentioned in the chat, a 5-5 ridiculousness going on in Klopp's final game, or Palace to absolutely steamroll a knackered Villa who are hungover from the festivities of finishing 4th. It's one of those where you're kind of betting on that. Buying a ticket to the lottery and hoping that you come out trumps. Who knows? I mean, in the part, like last kind of few years, I mean, you betted on Kane last year, didn't you?
I did,
as your final sort of thing. So I think I need something like that to come through for me, because last year it was Kane on kind of 97, 98% EO versus Salah, obviously overtaking that. I think Salah scored 1 goal, but Kane obviously went mental, and needs to be something like that out of nowhere, which would do it for me. I think at this point, with kind of being like 9-10 points outside of the top 100k. Just a nice segue, I suppose, into, and Sam, short pod, 116 minutes, 1 hour, 16 minutes. What have you done? What's wrong with you?
I know, poor, really poor.
Yeah. And so for me, I'm not going to be touching my team until I'm on my way to meets on Sunday, just because you just don't know, and there's going to be loads and loads of leaks coming through. I think that's the time to do it. I'm going to have definitely an idea by then. I have no idea right now. I think that's absolutely fine. There's loads of time to come on what I'm going to actually be doing. We've spoken about a lot of players that I'm interested in. Gakpo I'm interested in. Mateta I'm interested in. Elise and Eze probably going to be leaning towards Elise. I need to make a defensive transfer, I think, because Livramento is out for the season. Thanks, Eddie. There's no way I'm playing Dallo. And Dunk went off injured at half time against. So I've got to make a defensive transfer, and that's likely to probably be an Arsenal defender who comes in for one of those two, and that kind of limits me. And so unless I remove, an Isaac and for Gakpo or something like that, or I remove a Gordon for Elise and bench Isaac, or I remove Gordon for somebody else, and I don't know. It's one of those where there's going to be some but about whatever move I make, unless De Bruyne is ruled out.
How much money do you have in the bank?
0.9.
0.9. Interesting.
No, you can't do Dallo or Dunk to a white. That's kind of the idea, that I just do that on the final day. But I mean,
I was just wondering if you could downgrade Dunk and upgrade De Bruyne to Salah. I don't think you can get there. No,
I can't. No.
That's
way too much. So yeah, it's one of those where there's going to have to be a bit of creativity needed on a final day, which is always quite fun, and I'm looking forward to meets on that day. I think that I will be I don't know. I think that I'm going to have to go for differential captain on the final day.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
either
the
finish
it's
top
yeah.
100k or I finish outside top 100k. I think those are the two options now. I don't really see any way that I could captain Haaland and still finish top 100k as it stands. Even if I got a differential, an option differential in, if I got Elise and he did really well, I still think that I wouldn't finish top 100k. So I need to captain somebody else. I think that's how it is at the moment. Maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe my maths are wrong. But being 14 points off top 100k, if I have quite a straightforward team, even if I get in differential, I don't think that's going to be enough unless all of my players, unless that differential really, 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 really goes off.
Yeah, it'd have to be a big difference. Yeah.
Arsenal, it's awful. It's not the place I wanted to be at this point. But them's the breaks, really. What about you?
Yeah, so I'm not a million miles off of your situation. I think I finished up on 111k, so I think I'm 5 or 6 points outside. So probably don't need to force it quite as much as you. So I'm still pretty tempted to go with Haaland and hope that enough other people around our rank, around the 100k-ish rank, will feel like not settling on 110, 120 and making those different punts, and that gives me enough upside on Haaland captain at 160, 170% EO to make those little marginal gains, and overall the team's well enough set that I can combine a few of those marginal gains to get me over the line. That being said, I don't want to just leave it as is. Obviously, I've got an Arsenal slot. So if absolutely nothing else inspires me, I can do Petrovic to Raya. Very boring, but it covers off double clean sheet for Arsenal potentially. So that would be good. And I do like my three defenders this week. So Gabriel, Gvardiol and Porro, I think all have their own individual upsides. Obviously, Porro's very unlikely to keep a clean sheet, but the attacking upside is good enough that I would like to back that. And then on my bench, I've got Trippier as well. So there's an argument to, even if I wanted to maybe take a bit of a punt, I don't necessarily need to make a transfer to do it. I've got a 1% owned Trippier that I could just bring in for Porro, for instance, and that could be my differential without needing to make a move. So that's quite nice to just have up my sleeve if I want it. Moving into midfield and up front, I'll deal with that all at once, because I think at this point, realistically, I'm not going to be making a forward move. I think those will be my forward three. It's just whether or not I start all three of them or not. So I could make a move for Gordon to Elise. I really like that this week. Obviously, I mentioned Elise as a captaincy option, so I really do fancy him for this. I'm not sure whether or not I fancy him enough to be benching Isak or Jackson, but I could be tempted to do it. And if so, it would be a 3-5-2 and bench one of those two, most likely benching Isak at the moment. But of course, that would leave me without any Newcastle coverage in the midfield or forward line. And I think that will be quite an aggressive play. I think most people have at least one. So I don't know whether I'm far enough outside the top 100k to take that kind of risk in a team that is scoring quite a few goals at the moment. And yeah, I don't know. I really need to check out the vibes on the day on that one. But I do really like Elise. And I think if I'm going to make a midfield or forward move, he would be my number one priority, having already got Havertz in my side, of course.
Yeah, what's just occurred to me is I could do KDB for Elise and then do, like, my defense transfer could be Guardiola in for one of the defenders.
You
rather than
could.
an Arsenal defender.
You
Like,
could.
that is incredibly boring on one hand, but incredibly exciting on the I don't know. I just don't know at this point.
Elise is exciting enough, I think, to cover that off with excitement.
Someone's just asked me, could Palmer captain be a big enough differential over Haaland, for example? Let's go with him. Potentially that could be one as well. There's so many things I consider. I think maybe I need to just toss a coin and maybe put like write a few things on a piece of paper in front of my daughter and ask her to crawl to walk towards one of them, whichever one she picks up, I'll just go with. It really feels like that sort of scenario at the moment.
I like it. Like, I think there's enough randomness and sentiment in Game Week 38, as we've discussed throughout this pod, that you could do something if like rolling a dice or asking your daughter to pick. And that includes both sentiment and randomness. So I think that covers you off nicely.
Cool. Well, there we go, Sam. That's we've got done very well for doing a shorter pod this week, as usual.
Yeah, a whole 6 minutes short of the hour and a half we usually do. So yeah, thanks everyone for sticking around for almost a full 90 minutes once again. Once we get talking, you really can't stop us, I'm afraid. Thank you all so much for listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed who got the assist throughout the season. But if you have done so, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a follow on either WGTA_FPL or at FPL Pricey on Twitter. On Instagram and Threads, it's WGTA.FPL. Again, I'm just FPL Pricey on there. And of course, if you could leave us a like or subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or give us a 5-star rating if you're listening to the pod on Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, wherever, that would be really appreciated. And it would kind of be a thank you for the season as well. So we'd really appreciate that.
Cool. Well, we hope you enjoyed the pod. We'll be back next Tuesday after taking Monday off to recover from meets for our final pod of the year. If this is your final pod of the season, I know there's a lot of people who do kind of sign off after this and don't want to hear any more about the review for the season and stuff like that, which we'll cover on the final pod. Thank you so much for your company this year. I hope that you've enjoyed me and new co-host Sam. I think we can kind of drop the new now. But we thank you so much for your company and thanks so much for your support. We're not entirely sure when we'll be back, but we will be back for next season, assuming Sam doesn't quit sensationally. I suspect that'll be around the time the game reopens. I think I've got a young daughter, so I don't know whether there'll be any summer stuff going on. I think I'll try to write times in theory, but we'll speak about that probably a bit more over the course of this week, maybe into next week. Currently undecided when we'll be back. We will be back when the game reopens, that's for sure. In any case, thank you very much. Hope you had a good week or even a good summer if this is you. Enjoy Game Week 38 and ultimately we hope we assisted you.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist?